Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take a stack of your sources, articles, research, our own notes, and really pull out the most important bits of knowledge or insight. It's kind of your shortcut to getting up to speed, maybe with a few surprising facts, hopefully enough interest to keep you hooked. So our mission today is to give you a really concentrated look at major global and U.S. events from just one day. June 30, 2025. It's like a snapshot, right? But it really shows how interconnected everything is, how fast things move. And what's particularly striking is how these different events sort of point to this tightening global squeeze. We're covering quite a range: political fights in Washington, humanitarian crises, even some tech and entertainment stuff.
Yeah, it's fascinating. When you look at them all together, they're not just separate news items. They really give you a window into these evolving global dynamics and, domestic priorities. It shows the tough choices nations are, well, being forced to make now, often unprecedented choices.
Right. So as we unpack June 30th, it's pretty clear global conflicts are still a huge factor. Let's maybe start with Eastern Europe. There was a major escalation there. On that day, Russia launched what was described as its most massive aerial assault on Ukraine to date. We're talking over 500 drones and missiles fired.
500. Wow.
Yeah. And crucially, these weren't just near the front lines. They hit regions, far from the immediate conflict, even Western areas that were previously thought of as relatively safe.
That's a significant shift in targeting.
It is, and the impact was, well, devastating. Civilian casualties, major infrastructure damage. We even saw NATO countries like Poland scrambling their jets because of the threat near their own borders.
Understandable reaction.
And tragically, a Ukrainian F-16 pilot was killed during that defense operation. Now, this huge assault also happened alongside reports of something like 110,000 Russian troops gathering near Pokrovsk.
110,000. That signals a major push.
Exactly, a major escalation in their effort to seize control there. And all this while Ukraine is dealing with, serious ammunition shortages.
That troop buildup and the sheer scale of the air attack on June 30th, it does suggest a very deliberate strategy by Russia. Almost like they're testing Ukraine's limits, and maybe its allies' commitment too.
Yeah.
Given those ammo shortages you mentioned, were your sources talking about any, urgent diplomatic moves? Maybe allies trying to speed up aid, or perhaps other strategies Ukraine might be looking at to counter this pressure?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that pressure because Ukraine made a pretty controversial move on June 30th itself. They officially withdrew from the landmine ban treaty, the Ottawa Convention.
I know.
President Zelensky cited security needs, needing every tool to defend against Russian aggression. But this decision, while maybe understandable in wartime, it definitely sparked a big debate. Allies, humanitarian groups, they were all warning about the long-term dangers, right? Landmines stick around for decades, harming civilians long after conflicts end.
That's a really tough trade-off. If we connect that to the bigger picture, these Ukraine escalations and the deepening crisis in Gaza on that same day, June 30th, they just underscore the immense human cost of conflict. But maybe more than that, it highlights these incredibly complex diplomatic dances, the difficult choices nations are making, often balancing immediate security against long-term humanitarian worries. And speaking of Gaza, the UN's description on June 30th was stark.
Yeah.
Unbearable.
Unbearable, yeah.
Ongoing Israeli military operations, restricted aid access. It's left displaced people in just dire conditions. And tragically, more Palestinians were actually killed trying to get food.
Awful.
Yeah. And this spurred the U.S. under President Trump to make a renewed push for a ceasefire, engaging with regional partners and international groups.
So yeah, these deepening crises on one side, but then on the other, nations are actively rethinking alliances, their capabilities. Let's maybe pivot to the Indo-Pacific. We saw some pretty significant strategic shifts there too. On June 30th, the U.S. outlined this big reorganization of its military command in Japan, USFJ.
USFJ.
Air Force LT Gen Stephen Joust detailed how it's shifting from mostly a liaison role to a much more operationally integrated command.
So not just talking, but actually doing things together more tightly.
Exactly. It's not just moving boxes on an org chart. It's about moving towards truly joint operations. It signals a much deeper trust, more strategic preparation for potential issues in the region, especially with growing concerns about China.
It absolutely points to a more cohesive, maybe more agile military stance there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting how that USFJ change kind of mirrors other moves. Did your sources get into how this closer integration with Japan might specifically affect things like, say, intelligence sharing or joint rapid response in certain scenarios,
Okay.
beyond just general coordination.
Yeah, the core idea seems to be that operational fluidity, making things happen faster together. And underlining this whole strategic rethink in the Indo-Pacific, June 30th also had India's Foreign Minister Jaishankar at the Quad Summit in Washington.
With the U.S., Japan, Australia.
Yeah. And that meeting, much like the USFJ change, it clearly signals this concerted effort among key allies. They're focused on shared concerns, particularly regarding China, things like regional security, supply chains, tech cooperation.
All connected.
Totally. And in a kind of interesting side note, maybe signaling a potential diplomatic shift, China actually lifted its nearly 2-year ban on Japanese seafood imports on June 30th.
Oh, the one from the Fukushima wastewater discharge.
That's the one. So lifting it might, just might, signal a bit of a thaw in relations. Could have wider implications than just, fish.
Interesting detail.
So with all this happening globally, what does it mean back here in the U.S.? Because there was a lot going on domestically, too. On June 30th, 2025, the U.S. Senate moved forward President Trump's massive budget bill. This was after months of really intense talks.
Right, the big, beautiful bill.
That's the one, and it stirred up huge partisan divisions. It's really a classic example of those fundamental disagreements driving policy debates, isn't it?
It truly is. I mean, the Congressional Budget Office, they're the independent, nonpartisan folks who crunched the numbers. They estimated the bill would cut over $1 trillion from Medicaid.
$1 trillion from Medicaid.
Yeah, potentially causing nearly 12 million Americans to lose their health coverage.
12 million. That's huge.
It is. And it also aimed to end subsidies for renewable energy, put new taxes on solar and wind projects, plus tax breaks for wealthy individuals and corporations. So you had Republicans arguing it was needed for fiscal responsibility, economic growth, Democrats warning about, terrible consequences for vulnerable people, saying it erodes healthcare, inflates deficits. This bill, it wasn't just a budget adjustment. It really represents a major philosophical shift, kind of pulling back the federal safety net, gambling on supply-side economics in a way we haven't really seen since, the 80s? It fundamentally reshapes the social contract for millions.
That's a staggering figure, 12 million, and a profound shift, as you say. Did your research look into how those Medicaid cuts specifically would actually, hit people on the ground? Beyond just the big number, are certain states or groups expected to be hit harder if it passes?
Yeah. Sources were definitely indicating disproportionate impacts. Rural areas, for example, and certain states that rely more heavily on Medicaid could really worsen existing health disparities. But moving from fiscal policy to immigration, the administration expanded detention facilities in Florida on June 30th.
Oh, yes, the Alligator Alcatraz facility.
Exactly. President Trump visited this new center, nicknamed that because of its remote Everglades location and, the natural hazards around it.
Right.
This expansion was tied to calls for more detention capacity, especially as the administration moved to end temporary protected status, TPS, for over 500,000 Haitian immigrants.
500,000 Haitians potentially losing TPS status.
Yes. And human rights groups were fiercely critical of the new facility, warning about harsh conditions, the dangers of that remote location. Then, shifting to the legal side of things, Fox News actually filed a massive lawsuit, $787 million against California Governor Gavin Newsom and President Trump.
For what?
Alleging defamation and interference in their reporting on recent immigration protests. It apparently stems from a dispute over a phone call between Newsom and Trump.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a case with pretty significant implications for press freedom, the responsibilities of public figures. Where's the line between political talk and actual legal accountability?
That'll be one to watch. And sticking with domestic issues, there was some really alarming data out on June 30th regarding societal issues, specifically justice and safety. A Johns Hopkins report found that gun suicides hit a record high in the U.S. for the 3rd year in a row.
3rd year, that's grim.
Yeah, accounting for 58% of all gun deaths. And the report directly linked this tragic trend to rising firearm access and also pandemic-related stressors.
What's really sobering about that Johns Hopkins data is how it shines a light on a sort of hidden crisis within the bigger gun violence discussion. That link to pandemic stress suggests a deeper mental health component that maybe gets overlooked sometimes when we just talk about the stats.
That's a really important point. Absolutely. But on a more positive justice note, the Justice Department announced it was stepping up efforts to solve missing and murdered Indigenous people cases, MMIP cases.
Okay, good.
They're deploying additional FBI agents. This follows years of criticism, really, about inadequate responses, systemic neglect. Indigenous leaders welcomed it as a crucial step towards addressing some long-standing historical injustices.
That's definitely a positive development. Long overdue, many would say.
Agreed. So beyond all the policy and conflict headlines, June 30th also gave us this glimpse into, well, our environment, public health, and how technology is changing things. On the climate front, Southern Europe, Spain, France, Italy got hit by this unprecedented early summer heat wave.
Early summer, yeah. That seems to be happening more.
It does. Spain hit a scorching 46 degrees Celsius. That's about 115 Fahrenheit.
Whew.
Yeah. Record highs, wildfires raging in Turkey's Izmir region, too, and the impact was serious. Italy reported a 20% jump in heat-related ER visits. It's all being widely attributed to climate change.
These heat waves, they're becoming more than just uncomfortable, aren't they? They're direct public health emergencies,
Right.
really straining emergency services. But in a completely different story, a really remarkable environmental success emerged on June 30th from Australia.
Oh, what was that?
The revival of underwater forests of crayweed.
Ayweed. Okay.
Yeah, it's this vital marine ecosystem that actually disappeared back in the 80s because of sewage dumping.
Yeah.
But restoration efforts have seen real progress. They're enhancing biodiversity, supporting fisheries again.
That's fantastic.
It really is. It's a powerful reminder that, yes, we face huge environmental challenges, but human ingenuity and dedicated conservation work can actually produce incredible results sometimes.
That's a great story. Definitely offers some hope. Shifting back to global health and humanitarian issues, though, the UN warned on June 30th about a surging crisis involving Afghan migrants returning from Iran.
Returning from Iran.
Yeah, over 700,000 had returned this year alone, with something like 256,000 just in June. It's overwhelming Afghanistan's already fragile support systems.
Wow, that sheer volume of returns, that's a huge humanitarian crisis that's probably getting overshadowed by other global events. And speaking of sort of hidden crises, there was a really surprising UN WHO report that came out June 30th about loneliness.
Loneliness.
Yeah. It found 1 in 6 people worldwide are affected. And get this, loneliness-related deaths are occurring at a rate of 100 per hour.
100 per hour.
How? They're directly linking it to things like cardiovascular disease and depression. It's a stark reminder of these often unseen public health challenges we face globally.
That is truly sobering. 1 in 6 people. It really underlines how deeply our social connections affect our physical health. But on a more optimistic health note, there was a significant breakthrough announced. The FDA approved a new HIV drug from Gilead called Yeztugo on June 30th.
Yeztugo, yes.
This came after some really encouraging trial data showed it nearly eliminated HIV transmission. That's a major step forward, right, in the fight against a disease that's impacted millions.
Absolutely monumental. The approval of Yeztugo could potentially transform global public health, drastically reducing new transmissions, offering real hope to communities hit hardest by HIV. It's just a testament to sustained scientific research and collaboration.
It really is. And moving over to tech and culture shifts, we sort of marked the end of an era on June 30th. Microsoft announced it's retiring the infamous blue screen of death, the BSOD, in future Windows versions.
No more blue screen.
Yeah.
Really?
Apparently. They're replacing it with some new error reporting and recovery system. I think for anyone who's ever stared at that dreaded blue screen, there's probably a mix of nostalgia and definite relief.
Crazy. Oh, definitely relief. Maybe a little nostalgia, yeah.
And for a pop culture moment that literally had people on the edge of their seats, Beyoncé's concert in Houston got interrupted on June 30th.
What happened?
Her flying car stage prop malfunctioned while she was in it, midair.
Oh, my goodness. Was she okay?
Yes, thankfully. A rapid response, she was safely evacuated. The concert resumed, but it definitely sparked a lot of discussion about the risks involved in these increasingly complex, high-tech concert productions.
Yeah, it just shows even with multi-million-dollar setups, things can go wrong. Glad she was okay, though.
Me too. It's just another powerful reminder that, every single day brings its own mix of challenges and advancements, often in really unexpected ways.
It's so true. From those dire warnings on loneliness and mass migration to the triumph of new medical treatments and even the symbolic end of the BSOD, it all just reflects our evolving relationship with our health, our planet, and, well, the tools we create.
Well, what a deep dive that was. You've basically just journeyed around the globe and explored this snapshot of critical events from just one day, June 30, 2025.
We really have. We've seen how interconnected everything is, haven't we? From those big geopolitical shifts to domestic policy fights and all the ongoing human and environmental stories playing out constantly.
It really does show how much there is to understand just beneath the headlines, doesn't it? So, as you listen, consider this, rich tapestry of events from just one day. What stands out most to you? Is it the persistence of global conflicts, the very real impact of policy choices on everyday lives, or maybe those quieter breakthroughs in science and the environment? Maybe think about how these seemingly separate stories might actually influence each other in the months, maybe years ahead, shaping a future that, well, we're all part of.